This is Jen Julius with inspiration and information on this Thursday morning. The show's from 8 to 10 a.m. on the first and third Thursdays of the month. And today, I have a very special person in the studio with me. I have Judith Cain. She is a parent, educator, and coach right here in Sonoma County. She's an amazing woman that I've known for several years that is amazingly talented and knowledgeable and a lot of fun. So I'm very lucky to have her in the station today. Good morning, Judith.
Good morning. Hi, everybody out there.
So let's just jump right in. How does that sound?
All right.
Tell me about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, first of all, I've been doing parent education for 25 years. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. And what happened was in the 80s, I volunteered for a pilot program in child abuse prevention, which is just an amazing way to think about it, instead of waiting till after kids are abused.
Yeah.
And the volunteers who were chosen for the program were trained. We worked with attorneys and family court judge and police officers and a social worker. And then we were assigned families, and we were to meet with our families once a week, and then the social worker checked in with us every other week. So it was like a counseling intern program.
Whoa.
That's how I started. And after a year of doing that, I thought, this is the work I meant to do. I've got to find a way to do it. So I took myself back to school because I had dropped out of college to get married and have babies, which people used to do in those days. And so I went back to college. And while I was there, I created an honors project in child abuse.
Oh, wow.
So I studied child abuse really extensively. I know more than I even want to know about the causes and so on of child abuse. And while I was in that program, it was in Massachusetts, I volunteered at the Family Service Agency in town, and I was once again doing in-home parent education for them with work supervised by a social worker. So, and I was incorporating that work that I was doing with families into my child abuse project. And yep.
Wow.
And so then I did that, and then I came back to California, where I grew up, and went to Sonoma State and got my master's in marriage and family therapy. Never wanted to be a therapist. Just knew that I needed a master's degree for, I don't know, to give myself credence out in the world where you have to have little letters after your name. Yeah. And so my first job in Sonoma County was as an independent contractor with Child Protective Services, and I worked for them for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And families referred by social workers, and that's where I learned my stuff. And since then, I've worked with teenage families of teenagers, and all kinds of families, foster families who've taken in difficult children. I taught a workshop in Sonoma for a while, grandparents parenting again.
Oh.
Yep.
Wow.
For grandparents who had assumed responsibility because of whatever their kids could not raise the grandchildren.
Fairly
and
common.
And really hard.
Yeah.
Because speaking as a grandmother, you just get too tired.
Yeah, I bet. Well, and I would think that I know my grandma always mentions things about the huge generational difference not between me and her, you know, far more than between her and her kids or between me and my parents. But that bigger generational gap is just so significant, I couldn't imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're a grandparent and you're parenting, you have to learn a whole new vocabulary and, you know, electronic gear and iPads and I don't know, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's very, very different. Now, are the basics of parenting the same? Yeah, they are. Is it hard for grandparents? Because frequently, sometimes the mistakes that the grandparents made with their own children, which kind of got them into the situations that they're in, they have to unlearn that kind of parenting because you don't want to then visit it onto another generation, you know. So sometimes it was dictatorial, sometimes, you know, not going into too much detail. You know, if you've made some basic errors or had trouble connecting with your own children, you're going to have to look a lot more carefully at how you're going to parent those grandchildren.
And I would also wonder too, like, I think that how parenting has shifted in the last few decades has been pretty significant too. Just how perhaps, I know for my grandma, it worked great for her to have a very authoritarian father and have a lot of really clear, intense structure, but there also weren't as many external stimuli either. There wasn't TV in the house, and there definitely wasn't internet, and there weren't, if she was on a farm, there weren't just a bunch of kids down the street. And so it's interesting too how circumstances and generational shifts really have probably influenced a lot of the different parenting styles as well. And I couldn't imagine if I would have had Facebook in high school and how my parents could have monitored that. Right. So it's something I'm thinking about when I have kids. Oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with, with all this cell phone stuff when I used to be the cool kid at school because I had my dad's phone for a day, to now that expectation of having phones and having internet access and unlimited access to anything that we want, right, and how to navigate that as a parent as far as how we're going to let the environment influence our children. And yeah, it seems like it's a totally different world.
Right, and the other thing that we know now that we didn't know when certainly when my parents were raising me, but even when I was raising my kids, we have a lot more psychological knowledge now.
Ah, yeah.
We have tools that didn't exist before in terms of understanding things like birth order or, how you bring out the best of a child. And there's so many resources. Every magazine has an article about, sometimes you can have too much. Sometimes you get caught in a trap of, wait, this magazine says this and my friend says this. And, you have to pick and choose. But there's a lot more knowledge. And we also know the kinds of things that influence kids into the kind of adults they're going to be.
Right. And I think that's really significant is understanding the big influencers. That actually, and a little side note real quick, I don't know if the station knows this yet, but one of the other things I do is I go into San Quentin and I'm a consultant for an inmate-led program there right now. And one of the things that so many of the inmates have been saying, they're actually all juvenile offenders that were charged as adults primarily for murder. And the big key factor that they say they wish they had more of growing up is simply time with their parents. How amazing is that, right? Like the number one thing that many of them have mentioned as being a key factor in what they wish they had more of that may have really influenced their just wellness and behavior was just time. And they didn't say like a certain way that they wanted to be treated. They just said time with their parents.
Yeah. And it's one thing that is harder nowadays because usually both parents work.
Yeah.
You come home from working all day, especially when you got little kids. There's so much to do. There's meals, there's laundry, there's homework, there's, the bedtime routine. It is hard, but that's true. I had a friend who was a therapist in Marin County about 10 years ago, and he said he only worked with adolescents, and his entire client list was made up of kids whose parents really didn't have time for them. They had money, they were traveling in Europe, or they were running a company, or they were running a foundation, and they had to go to meetings all the time, but there wasn't that concentrated time on the kid.
That's funny that you say that. There's a book that I also went to Sonoma State and did the counseling program, but because I really didn't want to be a therapist, I did the school counseling program. So I got my school counseling credential. Then I got my life coach certification, and the rest is history, right? But the thing that's so interesting is one of the books we had to read in our school counseling program, or the master's in counseling program, was a book called, I forget who the author is, but the book title was Price of Privilege. And it was actually a book written here in Marin County, I believe, pretty local. And it was also a woman therapist, I believe, a female therapist in Marin County, who most of her clientele were adolescents from a very wealthy population, and the extremely high rates, I believe, of depression and just the overall feelings of lack of fulfillment, I suppose one would say, and not really understanding what fulfillment is to them or what that's supposed to be or where fulfillment comes from or happiness comes from. So that reminded me of what you were saying,
And those are hard things. Those are hard things to teach a kid. And some of it, you model it. But it's the time together. It's the concentration. And we know from working with teenagers and families of teenagers that sometimes that means driving in a car with your kid because they don't want to look in your eyes. But, that parallel conversation works really, really well. And, and the teenagers are hard. I'm not going to kind of jump in there, but you and I both know this, that one of my rules for parents of teenagers is listen more than talk.
Yes.
Because you've done all the talking from 0 to 12 or 13. They've got to start hearing their own voice, and you have to start listening to them.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you walk away,
Right.
You still have to
Free
live
for
your
all.
life as an example. You still have to be there. Someone once taught me this, and I don't use it a lot, but I think about it once in a while, that as a business model, from birth to 12, 13, you are the manager. You decide who your kid plays with and when they play and, all that stuff. From 13 to 18 or 12 to 18, you have to step back and be the consultant.
Wow, yeah.
You're there for them, but they've got to start making their own mistakes. They've got to start making their own decisions. And you have to pull back and allow them to do that. Otherwise, you got an 18-year-old who you send off to college, or a 20-year-old who goes, and they don't have any skills because you haven't given them that space and the chance to make their own mistakes. Now, the scary part about being a parent of a teenager is those mistakes.
Yeah.
Because some of those mistakes will kill you.
Yeah.
Drinking and driving and substance abuse and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But, they've got to make mistakes. And then you have a chance to say, how'd that go? And what might you do different next time? And what do you think you might have learned from that? In the kindest, most subtle way. Right?
I think that's the tricky thing, because it's sometimes we want to just lash out like, what the were you thinking?
Yeah. Sure.
Geez, what the heck? And I think that from our work with teenagers is for everyone out there, we both were family coaches for quite a few years, I believe. I know I was running the program for over a year and then working a few years before that. And what we did as family coaches was we worked with only youth on probation, doing in-home work with youth on probation and their families, working on chosen goals and primarily improving communication skills. And talk about an interesting adventure, and as Judith was saying, the importance of helping parents to learn to listen to their teenagers and helping teenagers feel, I would even say, empowered to talk, because I think sometimes to even get a teenager to share their real feelings is rather challenging. What do you think about that?
Oh, it is. Absolutely. Especially boy teenagers. They don't. And, our society doesn't help that, because there's that whole image of boys, little men or whatever, and you don't show your feelings. And, a lot of families don't buy into that anymore. Excuse me. But the society does to a degree. It's changing. It's definitely getting better. And we know that guys have feelings. And if your guy cries once in a while, hooray.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hooray. Yeah. And then to jump a little bit, you said something earlier that really stuck out to me. You said something about, I believe we were talking about grandparents parenting. And you mentioned, it's different, but at the same time, the basics of parenting are the same. And I was wondering if you might want to touch base on what you would consider a few of the basics.
Well, of course, the basic is to love. Love. Show your kid love. Talk about love. Say I love you. Not ad infinitum, not to make everybody crazy, but, I know families where they say that's how they say goodbye or hello, and it's nice. But you have to figure out who you are as a parent. And, that's a good thing to do before you have kids, but after they're born, that's fine. And so some people call it temperament. I like to call it rhythm. You have to figure out what your rhythm is and then what your kid's rhythm is. And then you have to impart the knowledge that you want to impart as a parent, and we've all, I suppose, got different goals, in the way that works for your particular kid. A family is not the military. It's not about giving orders and having your kid follow those orders. And I've worked with some military families, and sometimes the dads who were sergeants have a little difficult time with that. But it doesn't work well, excuse me, in a family. And so that's important to understand. And then understand how your rhythm works with your child's rhythm.
Absolutely.
And can I go back just for a second?
Please.
So how do you figure out there are people who who teach temperament training, what they call temperament training. But any of us can do that. Look at your newborn.
Yeah.
Look at your newborn. Listen, watch, observe. Some, even newborns, first 48 hours, first 3 weeks, you'll see a pattern. They'll wake up from nap and they'll lie there and look around and wiggle their feet and be calm. And other kids wake up shrieking. They are so hungry. You have to give them food immediately. And if you pay attention to that, you might find out that you've got one of those toddlers who has to eat 5 times a day in order to not have temper tantrums. They've got to have little hits of protein during the day.
Yeah.
So figuring that out at the beginning is kind of important. I do think that communication is the key to so much. It was the key to the work that we did with our families. It's the key to having a successful family. Yeah. It's the key to having your child listen and really hear, that you listen and really hear. Open communication. Doesn't mean you're talking all the time into their ears but to have that. Family meetings help some families to do it on a regular basis once a week. And family meetings are, something that I teach, how to have it, how it's most effective. But, listen and talk.
And communication, I'm sitting over here nodding like crazy because the concept of communication is so critical and important and broad. And I didn't even realize how important communication skills were, and also how communication skills also weren't taught. See, I can't even speak. Look at me teaching communication. Weren't taught in our school systems. We don't learn how to necessarily communicate with others effectively or how to voice our feelings unless we're fortunate to be part of a peer counseling program or some kind of conflict mediation program.
Right.
But there's so few of those. And I think that it's such an important skill that's actually one of the primary things I work on with my clients is not only communication with other people, but also how we communicate with ourselves, that self-talk, that little voice in our head that tells us how dumb we are and how ugly we are, and how to shift that communicative thought pattern, right? Because that's what it is. It's still a form of communication that's going to affect us and therefore affect our relationships with others, but then also how to shift our communication with other people so we can get more of what we want and need and feel happier and more fulfilled and really get our needs met from a deeper level. And I think that when we improve our communication skills and really are able to represent ourselves more genuinely and honestly, it really impacts our relationships, from intimate relationships, parent relationships, child relationships. Yeah, it's huge.
It is huge. And, one of the tricky things about parenting, how many times am I going to say that?
One of the tricky things. There's only one.
Yeah.
For anyone listening, there's only one tricky thing. It's about to be told right now.
Is you want to give your child that ability, I think, to look internally. Yeah. I mean, it's a great thing to learn with a kid. But, sometimes, and we see this with the quote-unquote helicopter parents who are so involved and their kids never fail and never have a chance to make a mistake. And, so what you have to do is you have to turn it around to I'll use an example. So there's a lot been written lately about little girls and self-image and anorexia starting as young as 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the immediate reaction for a mom, smart mom, whose 7, 8, 9-year-old says, "Oh, I'm so fat," is to say, "Oh, no, you're not, blah, 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 blah," and just say, "Oh, you look so cute in that." Blah. And what you've totally missed then is what your child is saying to you, which is, "I don't feel so good about myself."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to get in the habit of, instead of countering them with, "Oh, no, you're skinny," is, "Oh, it sounds to me like you're not feeling so good about things." And then close your mouth.
Yes.
You can open that door, and then you've got to leave time and space to listen. We talk so much, especially middle-class families, parents, talk. We drown our kids in words. You got to be quiet sometimes and open that space for them to talk.
Yeah. And yeah, to allow themselves the space and safety to represent themselves and explore what they're feeling. You know, I know for me that I need to talk just to figure out what I'm feeling. You know, it might take me 10 minutes to even get there. And I think that I was the same way when I was little. I definitely was sitting recording myself, believe it or not, talking to nobody. Big surprise, right? Here I am now. Well, and, you know, on the radio now, I'm forcing people to listen to me. You guys are stuck.
Were you hosting like a top late night talk show?
Something like that. No, It was actually the talk show before nap time. I actually, my mom's probably going to call in right now and correct my story, but I guess I was singing to myself and telling a story, and she came in and told me, "It's nap time, Jen," and she walked out of the room. I was 3, mind you. And she walked out of the room, and I say, "She's just kidding. I don't have to take a nap right now." And of course, Mom comes back in and says, "Oh, yes, you do. You get off that recorder right now." So always doing that thing. But it goes back to the talking, that freedom to talk and share and express, you know, and expressing ourselves in the way that is genuine to us, you know. And I even would speak of art and creativity and writing and allowing the space for that. But the spoken word and the spoken communication between a parent and child, I feel, is so important to also facilitate trust, which I feel is so critical, especially when we get into the teenage years, for the child to feel trusted by their parents and for the parent to trust the child. And sometimes what that includes is trusting them to make a mistake that is age appropriate, which we can definitely talk forever about, how some things are age appropriate. Don't freak out. And allow them to make these mistakes and learn from them, because hands down, the thing that I will stand by is experience is quite often what teaches us the most, period. Whether we're kids, whether we're adults, it's that life experience. And of course, education is great too, formal education, but it's the experience that often teaches us the most significant things in our lives.
Oh, yeah. Possibly one of the most easy examples is driving.
Yeah.
You know, the more letting your kid take your car is scary for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
The more they drive, the more then because you learn by doing.
Yep.
You know, and it's everything. You learn by doing and paying attention. And what's one thing that parents can help kids do starting when they're very young is to pay attention. You know, I have this gimmick that I teach, and it's called noticing. You know, it's like noticing your kid and then saying that, "Oh, I noticed that when you don't get enough sleep, you're kind of grumpy in the mornings. Have you noticed that?" You know, and then once again, close your mouth. You know, so you've put it out there, but you've put it out there as, and you really are noticing it. You know, what I notice as a parenting coach is how the parents react to their own kid. You know, it doesn't bother me that the kid's noisy or making noises or kicking the table or, you know, but parents, you can just see the parents start to go crazy.
Right.
Especially because they're doing it in front of me. But, you know, that's age appropriate for an 8-year-old or even some 13-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when they're older, you can expect, you know, how many times have we had to say to the kid, "Stop texting under the table while I'm talking to you." Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Texting. See, one of the new phenomenon.
Yeah. And that they can do it under the table without ever looking. Just amazes me.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to have like mutant thumbs here pretty soon. Within a few generations, right? These thumbs that are like, I don't even know what they look like. Maybe smaller so you don't hit multi-buttons. I don't know.
Could be.
Extra knuckles for flexibility. Who knows? What I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about, we talked a little bit about the basics, right? And we talked about love and the importance of that. And I think we touched on also the importance, well, maybe we didn't too much, but the importance of structure, right? And how children need a structured environment to really thrive, because it's that sense of being able to count on and predict what's going to come next. What do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, and structure means different things for different people. But the more chaos in your life and your kid's life, the harder things are going to be. So I also was a school counselor for 9 years in Santa Rosa. And very frequently this happened, that the parents would come to me and say, "You know, the teacher said my kid's doing great, follows the rules, stays in his chair, is fine on the playground. I cannot get this kid to do anything at home. They're disobedient. They talk back to me, won't do a chore, won't make their bed." And, you know, the thing that I figured out and taught was what is the difference between home and school? School is so predictable. The bell rings at 8 o'clock. You need to be either lined up outside the door for the teacher to greet you one by one. I worked at an elementary school. Or, and then you don't get to walk around in the classroom. You don't get to eat. You sit and do whatever you're doing till the bell rings at 10. Right. And then from 10 to 10:20 or whatever it is, water, bathroom, whatever the routine is. But it's predictable. It's the same every single day.
Yeah.
Now, if you can take some of that predictability, home is not school, and you're not going to make it that rigid.
Yeah.
But kids like to know, even little tiny toddler kids like to know, what's happening, what's coming next, what's predictable, how is the day going to run? For some parents, it means saying to your kid, today's the day we go such and such, and then we're going to the store, and then we're going to go visit grandma. And then we're going to come home and, have dinner, and it's going to be your regular bedtime. Or however, you have to figure again what works best for you, what works best for your particular child. Some kids absolutely have trouble with transitions, for instance, especially toddlers. You need to let them know.
Transition time. Yeah.
I've seen kids who, and smart parents who will say to their kid who has trouble with transitions, who's playing with blocks or Legos or something, "Oh, you're doing such a nice house with your Legos. You know what? We're leaving in 15 minutes and we're going to go to the store and you're going to come with me. We're going to have such a good time. We're going to pick out some nice cereal, blah, 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 whatever it is." And then, okay, you're doing well. We're leaving in 10 minutes. And then you come back and do 5 minutes. And then you talk the kid through the transition. Okay, we're going to leave this city up so that you can play with it when we get back. And it's kind of cold. And as you're walking out the door, you're putting the jacket on and putting them in the car and chatting and saying how much fun you're going to have. Now, a lot of kids don't need that. Some kids, you say, okay, let's go to the store. Okay. They're going to drop what they're doing and come with you. That's the key about understanding your child.
Yes.
You know what I always say? You have to parent the kid you've got.
Yes.
Not the kid you want.
Oh,
not
and please
the dream
don't
kid.
compare. Oh, gosh, that triggers me so bad. Well, little Susie down the street is not your child and not your problem.
And even the brothers and sisters are not this particular child.
Exactly.
The 3 older ones might have been easy kids and gone along with what's happening. And this 4th kid or the 2nd kid might be the kind of kid who pushes against the rules from the minute they're born. Well, then you have to adjust the parenting. Yeah. The rules stay the same, whatever the family rules are. And we can talk a little about that.
Communication. Yeah.
Well, and there's, for instance, toddlers have to have safety rules. You're always in your car seat. Yep. You may not be in the kitchen when we're cooking because that's dangerous, and however you set that up. But the rules keep changing as the child gets older. And you have family rules. We speak to each other respectfully. We use quiet voices. We keep our hands to ourselves. We don't walk on the furniture. I don't like rules in the negative, but furniture is for sitting on. However, how you teach the individual child to follow those rules. Some kids, you say it once and it's done.
And you just said you don't like rules in the negative, and I think I want to just touch on that for a lot of people to explain what we mean by that, is that it's so important to explain what we want rather than what we don't want. And this is also something I do with adults a lot as far as like visualizing in the law of attraction and creating the life that we want. When you're giving a toddler, for example, instructions, it needs to be what you want them to do, not what you don't want. Because first of all, they don't even really have the capacity to be able to figure out what you mean and what you want. For example, if your 2-year-old's running across the living room, don't tell them, hey, don't run. Instead, what you should ask is, hey, please walk. Because then they actually know what you want from them, and they can actually perform that and adhere to that.
Right, and that's a perfect example where you can make that a family rule. We walk in the house. Yep. The problem with the nose is, first of all, toddlers hear it all the time. Because part of what toddlers do is break rules. Yep. And that's how they're exploring the world and learning who they are and learning that they're separate from you. Yeah. But a kid who hears no all the time, no, stop doing that. No, you can't eat now. No, we're going to have dinner soon. No, get off the couch. Yeah. No, you can't watch TV. And parents wonder why the kid's first word and favorite word is no. It's most of what they've heard,
I think that was my first word. Except it was for a different reason. I was trying to get medicine. No!
And some kids are just no people, and they're going to have that. They're those kids who, they're pushing for their own rights from the beginning.
Yeah, and they're trying to figure out who they are and where they belong, right?
Right. And then those are kids who you say, I'm thinking of a kid I knew, and when she finally learned to say, "I very angry at you, mommy," because she learned that emotion, they don't have words for their feelings. They just know. When they can put a word to the emotion and express it, well, they're on their way toward having better communication. Because before that, it's falling on the floor and screaming,
Right. So, and that makes me want to actually touch on the concept of parents being their child's biggest role model, right? And I think that sometimes we often forget that, even in our everyday lives, when perhaps as, what's an example? Maybe a dietitian or a nutritionist who eats junk food all the time. Probably not going to have a very thriving business, right? And so then we think about that whole do as I say, not as I do. Not really going to happen with parenting. I mean, it might work if you're a big CEO of a company and you're telling all your employees what to do and you're not doing any of it.
That's not even effective.
Yeah, that's not effective either,
I used
right?
to work in the corporate world.
Yeah. Back in a past life before the parent education, when you should have been teaching the CEOs how to run stuff too, right?
Oh, right.
But I think that that's so important, is the concept of role modeling for our children. And I would wonder if that child that was able to say, "I very angry," was also raised in an environment where parents were verbalizing their feelings to each other and sharing with their significant other how they were feeling and when they were upset. And even, this is the interesting part, letting that be okay. If anger is a natural feeling, right? And so being able to express that rather than just react to it, I think is another huge thing to be able to show our children, how we can have all these different feelings, sadness, happiness, anger, and we can express them appropriately.
Right. And anger is the perfect one because for modeling, first of all, if you lose your temper, you the parent, and scream at your child, what have you just modeled for them?
Yep.
And better to say, "I'm feeling really angry and I'm taking a timeout." Now, parents' timeouts are actually a lot more important than kids' timeouts.
Yes.
But say it to your kid. "I'm feeling really angry. I need a timeout." Walk over to the sink, wash your face with cold water, hold your wrists under really cold running water. That tends to calm you down in the pulse points. There are other things. Now, if you've got a 2-year-old, you can't walk out of the house and leave the kid for 20 minutes.
Right.
You have to find
Please
a way.
don't do that. We do not endorse any of those behaviors here at Cows 107.3 FM.
Yes, but you can. You can take that time out. And you teach yourself how to appropriately deal with your own anger. And, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all did that before we had children? But it's a lesson to be learned. And then you're modeling for your child that, yes, I get angry, but I know how to deal with it. It's a really hard thing for families. And a lot of times when I'm working with a family, they think that I'm going to change the kid. But my goal is to change the parent, how the parent talks to their child, how they react to the child, especially a child's negative behavior or uncooperative behavior, and then how they respond. When the parent changes their behavior, the kid's behavior will change. I don't have to do anything to the kid. Now, it takes a while.
Yep.
It's, the 90 meetings in 90 minutes thing for addicts.
Oh, yeah. 90 meetings in 90 days.
In 90 days. I didn't mean minutes. Yeah, days. And it's the same, sorry. And
It's
it's the same thing with changing your behavior to model for your kids. It takes about 90 days to undo a behavior that you've worked together to create, and then change that behavior so that your child, and you can say to your kid, I don't like the way I've been acting when I get really angry, and I'm going to really try to change that. It won't happen right away, and then you say to your kid, "I'm feeling so angry right now, but I'm going to take a time, and walk away and take that deep breath or count to 10 or, count backwards from 160 or whatever weird thing you do."
And I can't, I don't want to put it on a negative. I don't want to sound like I'm blaming, but I can speak from the program director's role of a community agency that was running a family coaching program for youth on probation dealing with parents. And I can hands down say that a very high number or percentage of the failures, we had to call them, for our program were parents that were not willing to comply with the program, not the teen. And that's heartbreaking because the way that I had to run the program was through compliance. And if homework was being completed, if things were being attended to and done. And unfortunately, when the parents weren't complying, it was a failure. And it reflected back to the youth on probation. And what I also noticed is the biggest successes we had, and this actually goes for my most recent position as a support counselor with youth with pretty severe mental health issues in their families. In both of those programs, the most significant progress I saw was when the parents really bought in and really tried to shift their own behaviors as well. Because then the kid sees, wow, you're trying to, and also deeper, you care about me that much? And I think that is sometimes the thing that we're demonstrating by showing that we're willing to do the work as parents, or by working with outside people to perhaps change our behaviors and just learn new things, because it's not, you don't know what you don't know. You're not just born or have a kid and say, oh, now I know everything about being a parent, right? If we only know what we've perhaps learned from our parents or learned from watching other people parent, and so if it's not working and we show that we're interested in learning something different, how awesome is that? And how great is that to show your child that you're willing to learn new things and new techniques, and you care about them that much that you're willing to try to shift your own behaviors, which is challenging, hands down. I can attest to that.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's really, really hard. It's the hardest thing that a lot of people have to do because where do we first learn to parent is by being children in a family. Now, if we come from a family where things are dealt with well, easily, in an intelligent, calm manner, I don't know who comes from a family like that.
Yeah.
Then we have a head start when we're going to be parents. But it's what we bring to our family, that the family that we create, is what we learned from our own family. And if that's yelling, if that's not having anger management skills, if that's overreacting to everything, if that's walking out of the house and not dealing with the issue, whatever it is that you saw your parents do, you tend to bring that. It's why, working on those issues before you have children, once again. But, we're human. We get pregnant or we get married. Oh, we're so in love. Let's have a baby. And we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think that the important thing to also remember and realize is mistakes happen on all humans' ends because we are human, right? And the important thing to remember is we can change. That's the most beautiful thing, I think, about the human spirit, is the ability to be resilient and to bounce back from things and make shifts and make changes. And,
all therapy is changing your behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's all a lot of the work we do, is to help people change. And we're all capable of it. That's what's so amazing.
Yes.
You have to want to do it. You have to work at it. You have to put some energy and thought into it. But to change a behavior, that's all giving up your addiction is changing a behavior. Yeah. That's all. Some people are, we've all called them rageaholics. Some people are addicted to their own anger. At some level, it feels so good to just let it out. And, it's devastating to the people around you. Yeah. But that's definitely behavior that can be changed.
Yeah.
I was telling someone the other day, one of the exercises I give to people who yell a lot, because a lot of kids really hate yelling, especially little kids. It's overwhelming. It's so scary. Yeah, it's so big. Is to make them whisper every time they want to yell.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to use that self-control. It's so hard, but it makes you stop.
Yep.
And the kid is just shaken because there's this whole new level of intensity, and it's so much easier to deal with. But what it does to the parent is to make them stop and think and change that behavior. For some people, it's so easy to yell. And anyone who grew up in a yelling family, and I'm not talking about families. I have a friend in a big Italian family, and they just talk loud and use their hands and argue, and it's all in good spirits. I'm talking about yelling with anger and hostility and pointing out every lousy thing that your partner did. It's so hard to overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. Woo, man, time flies when you're having fun. Yeah. So we are talking to Judith Cain, parent, educator, and coach. This is Jen Julius, health and lifestyle consultant. You can find my website at jenjuliusconsulting.com. Judith is a parent, educator, and coach, and she's here at COWS. We've been interviewing for about the last 40 minutes. If you are interested in what you've been hearing and you'd like to speak with her further, her direct phone number is 707-542-1082, and she offers coaching classes, workshops, and family support. Judith and I actually will be launching a workshop series within the next 1 to 2 months, and you can stay tuned on my website, jenjuliusconsulting.com, for that. We're going to be doing some workshops for parents and from different ranges, from toddlers to teenagers to in-betweeners, and maybe even some parents-to-be. So we'll see about that and getting parents ready for that transition and the things that you don't hear from other parents perhaps before you have a child, or maybe the things your parents didn't tell you. So stay tuned at my website, jenjuliusconsulting.com, for those upcoming workshops and classes. And also you can sign up on my website on jenjuliusconsulting.com for a newsletter. We'll also definitely be sending emails out, broadcasting those workshops coming up, so you can put your email there to get a hold of my newsletter and email updates. So as we wind down, there's a big question that I want to ask as we end, and that is, Judith, what is the end goal of parenting? Why do we do this?
Well, and it's a huge question that people tend to not think about. And I have my own point of view, which is what I teach. I think that the end goal of parenting, the reason we do what we do, is to create an independent adult able to make good decisions for themselves and move more easily in the world. Now, it's not to be your kid's best friend or buddy. It's not to make every day of their lives easier. It's not to consistently ease their way through life. They have to learn as they go along.
Yeah.
And that's, we've all known adults who can't make a decision, who are ruled by their addiction, or who can't have a decent relationship. And all those things, you can't do everything as a parent, and sometimes there are definitely more difficult children than others. And it's a challenge. It's just a challenge to parent the more difficult children. But I just believe that that's the goal. And that means giving them the tools, letting them make decisions during the teen years, when I believe that from 12 to 18, you have to totally change your parenting techniques. And part of those years is letting go, letting them make their own decisions. And the example that I give frequently is, if you keep doing for your kid and doing for your kid and you think, oh, and now we're so close and now we have such a good relationship. and then your kid goes to college, and they don't know how to do their laundry.
Yeah.
Because you've done it for them. Or they don't know how to plan, sometimes in college, in your first year, you're assigned a 35-page paper due, 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
And if mommy or daddy isn't there to say, oh, don't forget, you better go to the library, or you better do that research. I guess people Google now. They don't go to the library. You better start planning, better start writing. Have you decided, then how is your kid going to do that? When I sent one of my kids off to college at 18, he turned 18 in September and he went to college. And the dean, I think it was the dean of admission, so I won't swear to it, gave a talk to all the parents and said, all these kids are smart. They got into this really good school. We don't worry about them academically. She said, too many of you have done too much for your child. And where they're going to fall apart is that they don't have life skills. And she said that. They won't know how to do their own laundry. They don't know how to save quarters for the washer and dryer that are in the basement, because you've always done it for them. They don't know how to plan through a paper. And that's where she said, I'm going to tell you, that's where these kids are going to fall apart, is their inability. She said, we consider even 18-year-old first years young adults. We want them to fill out their financial aid forms themselves. And it caught a lot of people really off guard. But I agree with that. I support that. And not every kid's ready at 18. But that's the goal. That because you spend a lot more time. You know, my mom's 99 and a half. She spent a lot more years as an adult than she did as a child. All those years,
99 and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for any of us, we're adults a lot longer than we're children.
Yes.
That's where we have to prove our effectiveness.
Right. Wow. Thank you, Judith, for sharing so much information with us today. Wow.
You're welcome.
I hope all the listeners are able to gain some nuggets. We have to wind down with this interview, but who knows? Maybe Judith will be back on Cows on information and inspiration. Inspiration and information. Forwards, backwards, all over the place. We are with Inspiration and Information and Jen Julius on Thursday mornings from 8 to 10 a.m., the first and third Thursdays of the month. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And thank you so much for listening to this recorded interview with Judith Cain on March 21st, 2013. Please listen in to my show, Inspiration and Information, on Cows Radio, 8 to 10 a.m. on the first, third, and fifth Thursdays of the month. This is Jen Julius, and thank you again.